Hey guys, so today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Articles of Confederation and we're going to do a comparison kind of example to the Constitution in a way, but ultimately you guys will, for this assignment, be writing an argumentative piece about why we needed to switch to the Constitution, or whether or not you think we should have. So what we're going to do is we're going to work out what's known as a DBQ, and that's the document-based question about the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. In it, we're going to take a look at some of the some primary and secondary sources that basically discuss the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution during the Constitutional Convention, and we're going to make this into a cohesive, nice, wonderful paper graded on the 6+1 rubric. All right, so when we talk about that, presentations are tomorrow. Missing work I will take as soon as you guys can get it to me, and quiz retakes as soon as you guys see your quiz scores. Some of you may want to do retakes. All right, so primary sources, just kind of clear the water a little bit. Primary sources are sources that were written or created during the time of the event. So when we talk about primary sources, what we're talking about is we are talking about sources that came from that original era of history. Believe it or not, you guys are all constructing primary sources on a daily basis. And everything that you guys do, you are creating a primary source. Your tweets, your Instagrams, your Facebook, your text messages, your schoolwork are all making a point in history that someday in the future people can study. And what means is that you created these during the time period that they are studying. Therefore, what you've created are primary sources. Think of a soldier that goes off to war. We study the letters that they write home to understand what they were thinking during the war and what it was like to be a soldier. That's a primary source. Think about a letter between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of England during World War II. We study that to see what both Roosevelt and Churchill were thinking. And it allows us to look into the minds there. That's why primary sources are so cool, right? So when we take a look at one like we did when we looked at the Noah Webster quote yesterday in class, and we had an example to kind of see basically what we were looking at. And that's a really important thing for us to see, is that Noah Webster had these feelings there. Now we go back and we study. No, everyone didn't want the Articles of Confederation. Some people didn't like them, and that's an important thought. For our purposes, primary source was created during the time of the Articles of Confederation and the Constitutional Convention. Contradictory to a primary source is our secondary source. Secondary sources are sources that were written or created after the time of the event. So basically, to write a secondary source, a lot of times we study primary sources. Your social studies textbooks throughout your life usually contain some primary sources, but are for the most part secondary sources. And we see that as they are written after history has happened. All right. So for our purposes, secondary source was created after the time of the Articles of Confederation and the Constitutional Convention. Doesn't matter what type of source you're working with, the usage of sources doesn't change all that much. So in this one, you guys will see that we have background information. The Articles of Confederation left the United States with no real executive power. Congress was a mess, requiring 9 of 13 votes to pass a law, and all 13 to amend articles. Many people were upset about the way the government went. Noah Webster, an outspoken supporter of the new Constitution and a former school teacher who would publish his first dictionary in 1806, had this to say about the government of the United States under the Articles of Confederation. There's your background information. Highlight, mark up the text, anything that you guys think is important. Next, we want to actually look at our source, and we want to ask ourselves a few questions to make sure that we have this. First, who wrote this? Tells us Noah Webster wrote it. All right, why did they write this? Well, because the background information tells me that he's not satisfied. And when I read it, so long as any individual state has power to defeat the measures of the other 12, our pretended union is but a name, and our confederation a cobweb. I'm going to guess that he was outspoken, not a fan of the Articles of Confederation, which was already kind of pretty much told me. He wanted a new constitution, and one of the reasons that he wanted that new constitution was the other 12 states could be defeated by one state. All right, when did he write this? Well, it came out in 1785. That's 2 years before the Constitutional Convention. All right, what were they trying to say? Well, he was definitely trying to say it's time for a constitution. What perspective or bias does he have? Well, we know that he was a supporter of the Constitution, so that would be his bias. Of course, he's going to write something that wants us to think about it. All right, then we want to look at the actual question. What am I trying to gain from this? What issues was Noah Webster identifying with the Articles of Confederation? Why would Mr. Webster point this out? And this is a great place to start. So we know that he is identifying the issue of how much it took to get things done. Why would he point this out? Because our government can't function. It's there. Do not be afraid to mark up the text. So things I like to see is I like to see highlighting, underline, circling, question marks. If you guys have questions, that helps me understand exactly where you guys are, where you're stuck. All right. So timetable for this whole thing. I mean, I just handed you guys a ton of pages. It's important that we take a look at final drafts at some point next week. I don't want to put a concrete date on it with weather and all this other stuff that could potentially happen, but I do want to try to get rough drafts done by Friday or Monday, which means that we have to move through some of these pretty quickly, right? So there are 10 total documents that you guys will look at, and then basically what we'll do is we'll go through probably 1 through 4 today, 4 through 8 on Wednesday, and 9 and 10 on Thursday, and start our actual pre-writing process so that we can finish our rough drafts by the end of class on Friday, or have them ready to go on Monday so that we could do peer evaluations and have somebody else read our papers and see where mistakes are. All right, and then what will happen is I will do a evaluation, give you guys the opportunity to correct it, and we'll go from there. All right, so hopefully this goes well for you guys. I'm here to work with you to make sure you guys remember that, and take care.